Ever wonder what happened to those gospel songs that had everybody in church jumping, crying, and catching the Holy Ghost? You know the ones. They played on every gospel station, showed up in every church service, and had your grandmama humming them while she cooked Sunday dinner. Well, today we're counting down 10 one-hit wonders in gospel music you probably forgot about, but definitely need to hear again. Reverend Paul Jones, I Won't Complain.
Moved in our present location where we are now. And that's why the song I Won't Complain means so much to me.
This song came out in the late 1980s when gospel music was going through some serious changes. The old school traditional sound was mixing with contemporary styles, and Paul Jones rode that wave perfectly. The song itself is basically a musical therapy session. Jones sings about all the stuff life throws at you, the bills, the heartbreak, the struggles. But he keeps coming back to that chorus, I won't complain. It wasn't just pretty words either. This man could sing. His voice had this raw, weathered quality that made you believe every single word coming out of his mouth. What made this song blow up was the timing. The late 80s were tough for a lot of folks. The economy was shaky, crack was destroying communities, and people needed something to hold on to. I Won't Complain became that something. It wasn't asking people to be fake happy or pretend everything was fine. Instead, it said, yeah, life is hard, but I'm still here and I'm still grateful. Paul Jones had been singing in churches for years before this song made him famous. He was one of those preachers who could make grown men cry with his voice alone. The song started getting radio play after someone recorded him singing it at a church service in Detroit. That recording was raw, unpolished, and absolutely perfect. Radio DJs started playing it, and before long, everybody wanted to know who this man was. The crazy thing about Paul Jones is how he handled his sudden fame. While other artists were trying to capitalize on their success, Jones kept doing what he'd always done, preaching and singing in small churches across the South. He would show up at little country churches and blow people's minds with that voice. He never seemed interested in the music business side of things. He just wanted to sing for God and help people feel better about their lives. Unfortunately, Paul Jones died young, which explains why we never got a follow-up hit. He passed away in the early 1990s, just a few years after I Won't Complain made him famous. Some folks say he had health problems. Others say the music industry stress got to him. Either way, gospel music lost a real one. The song still shows up occasionally at funerals and during tough times. It's one of those songs that feels timeless because the message never gets old. Life keeps throwing curveballs, and sometimes all you can do is say, I won't complain. 2. Call Him Up If You Need a Friend by Keith Pringle. Keith Pringle's Call Him Up is probably the most energetic church song you've never heard of. This thing came out in the mid-1980s and had church choirs going absolutely crazy. We're talking full-on, falling out of chairs, running around the sanctuary type of energy. Pringle was this young guy from Chicago who grew up singing in church choirs. He had this incredible ability to get people hyped up about God. Call Him Up was his masterpiece, a song that basically turned prayer into a party. The lyrics were simple but effective. When you're in trouble, when you need help, just call Him up. But the way Pringle delivered it made it feel like the most important phone call you'd ever make. The song became huge in black churches across America. Church choirs started adding their own arrangements, and every gospel DJ had a copy in their rotation. It was one of those songs that could wake up a sleepy congregation in seconds. All the choir director had to do was play those opening notes, and suddenly everybody was on their feet. What made Call Him Up special was how it captured the African American church experience perfectly. It had the call and response format that got everybody involved, the kind of beat that made you want to move, and lyrics that spoke to real people dealing with real problems. Pringle understood that sometimes you need to make faith feel fun and accessible. The song was also huge because it came out during the gospel explosion of the 1980s. This was when gospel music was starting to sound more contemporary, with better production and catchier melodies. Call Him Up fit right into that movement. It had the traditional church energy, but with a modern twist that appealed to younger listeners. Keith Pringle seemed destined for big things. He had charisma, talent, and a song that proved he could connect with audiences. But for whatever reason, he never managed to recreate the magic of Call Him Up. He released other music, but nothing caught fire the same way. Maybe it was bad timing, maybe it was industry politics, or maybe lightning just doesn't strike twice in the same place. These days, you'll still hear Call Him Up in older churches, especially when they want to get the congregation pumped up. It has become one of those classic choir songs that every gospel singer knows, even if they don't remember Keith Pringle's name. The song outlived its creator's fame, which is both beautiful and kind of sad. 3 More Than Anything by Lamar Campbell and Spirit of Praise.
I love you, Jesus.
Lamar Campbell's More Than Anything was the slow jam that made even the toughest church folks get emotional. This song came out in 2000 when gospel ballads were having a moment, and Campbell absolutely nailed the assignment. Campbell wasn't your typical gospel singer. He had this smooth, almost R&B style voice that could have easily landed him on secular radio. But he chose to use his gift for worship music, and More Than Anything showed why that was such a smart move. The song was basically a love letter to God, with Campbell singing about wanting to please the Lord more than anything else in the world. The song became huge in churches because it felt so personal and intimate. While other gospel songs were about celebration and praise, More Than Anything was quiet and contemplative. It was the kind of song that played during altar calls when people were making serious decisions about their faith. Campbell's voice had this way of making everyone in the room feel like he was singing directly to them. What really made the song special was its simplicity. The lyrics weren't complicated or full of church jargon. Campbell just sang about wanting to make God happy, about putting faith first, about choosing spiritual over material things. It was the kind of message that resonated with people who were trying to live right, but struggling with worldly temptations. The production was perfect too. Instead of heavy drums and big orchestrations, More Than Anything had gentle keyboards, soft strings, and space for Campbell's voice to shine. It felt like a prayer set to music. The song would start quiet and build slowly, giving listeners time to really absorb the message. Lamar Campbell and Spirit of Praise were getting serious radio play with this song. Gospel stations loved it because it showcased the more thoughtful side of contemporary gospel music. It proved that you didn't need to be loud and energetic to move people's hearts. Sometimes a whispered prayer could be more powerful than a shouted praise. The group seemed poised for bigger things. Campbell had the voice, the songwriting skills, and a sound that could appeal to both traditional and contemporary gospel audiences. But somehow they never managed to follow up More Than Anything with another hit. They released other music, but nothing captured the same magic or got the same level of attention. Part of the problem might have been timing. By the early 2000s, gospel music was changing again. Artists like Kirk Franklin were pushing the genre in more experimental directions, and quieter worship songs like More Than Anything got lost in the shuffle. Campbell's style felt almost too understated for the new gospel landscape. 4. Center of My Joy by the Richard Smallwood Singers.
Jesus, you're the center of my joy, my joy. All that's good.
Richard Smallwood was already a legend in gospel music circles when Center of My Joy became his biggest mainstream hit in the late 1980s. But here's the funny thing. Most people who loved this song had no idea about Smallwood's incredible body of work or his influence on contemporary gospel music. Smallwood had been writing and arranging gospel music since the 1970s. He was classically trained, which gave his music a sophisticated sound that set him apart from other gospel artists. Center of My Joy was actually one of his simpler compositions, but it connected with audiences in a way that his more complex pieces never did. The song came out at the perfect time for gospel music. The genre was becoming more accessible to mainstream audiences, and Center of My Joy had everything radio programmers were looking for. It had a beautiful melody, uplifting lyrics, and Smallwood's incredible vocal arrangements that made the Richard Smallwood singers sound like angels. What made this song special was how it captured pure joy without being overly sentimental. The lyrics talked about God being the center of happiness, but Smallwood delivered the message with such genuine warmth that it felt natural rather than preachy. The song made faith feel like a celebration rather than a burden. The Richard Smallwood singers were incredible vocalists who could handle Smallwood's complex arrangements with ease. Their harmonies on Center of My Joy were absolutely gorgeous. Each voice had its moment to shine, but they all came together to create something bigger than the sum of its parts. It was the kind of vocal performance that made other gospel artists jealous. The song became huge on gospel radio and even crossed over to some R&B stations. It was sophisticated enough for jazz lovers, but accessible enough for mainstream audiences. Smallwood had found that sweet spot between artistic integrity and commercial appeal. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the success of Center of My Joy, Richard Smallwood never had another song reach the same level of mainstream recognition. It wasn't because he stopped making great music. Smallwood continued writing and performing beautiful gospel songs for decades. It was more that lightning doesn't always strike twice, and the music industry moved on to other sounds and artists. Smallwood himself seemed okay with being known primarily for one song. He continued working in gospel music, mentoring younger artists, and creating beautiful worship music. Center of My Joy became his calling card, the song that introduced him to audiences who might never have discovered his other work. 5. Optimistic by Sounds of Blackness. Optimistic by Sounds of Blackness was the gospel song that didn't sound like a gospel song, and that's exactly why it became so huge. Released in 1991, this track came out when music was getting more experimental, and Sounds of Blackness decided to blend gospel with R&B, hip-hop, and soul in ways that nobody had tried before. The group was actually a choir from Minneapolis that had been performing since the 1970s. They were known for their incredible vocal arrangements and their willingness to experiment with different musical styles. But Optimistic was something completely different. It was their attempt to take gospel music to the masses without losing its spiritual message. The song was built around this infectious groove that made you want to dance. It had rap verses, sung choruses, and a message about staying positive in tough times. The lyrics talked about keeping faith when things look bad, about believing that better days are coming, and about the power of positive thinking. It was spiritual without being explicitly religious, which helped it reach audiences who might not normally listen to gospel music. What made Optimistic blow up was how it captured the mood of the early 1990s perfectly. This was right after the recession, during a time when people were dealing with economic uncertainty and social problems. The song offered hope without being naive about reality. It acknowledged that times were tough, but insisted that maintaining a positive attitude was the key to getting through hard times. The production was incredible, too. Instead of traditional gospel instrumentation, Optimistic had live drums, funky bass lines, and samples that gave it a modern edge. But the vocals were pure gospel, those incredible harmonies and call and response sections that Sounds of Blackness was known for. It was like they took the best parts of gospel music and wrapped them in a contemporary package. The song became a crossover hit in ways that most gospel songs never do. It got played on R&B radio stations, dance clubs, and even some pop stations. The music video was in heavy rotation on video shows, introducing the group to audiences who had never heard of them. For a minute there, it looked like Sounds of Blackness was about to become the next big thing in music. But then something strange happened. They never had another hit quite like Optimistic. They released other music, some of it really good, but nothing that captured the same lightning-in-a-bottle magic. Maybe it was because Optimistic was such a perfect storm of timing, sound, and message that it couldn't be repeated. Or maybe the music industry just moved on to other trends. The group continued performing and recording for years after Optimistic. They won Grammy Awards, toured internationally, and maintained a loyal fan base. But in the broader music world, they became known as the Optimistic Group, the folks who had that one incredible song that everybody remembered. 6. Come Thou Almighty King by Reverend Timothy Wright.
Come down, mighty King.
Reverend Timothy Wright's version of Come Thou Almighty King is one of those songs that proves you can take something old and make it feel brand new. This track came out in the early 1990s when gospel artists were experimenting with traditional hymns, giving them contemporary arrangements that made church folks lose their minds. Wright wasn't some young upstart trying to make a name for himself. This man had been in ministry for decades, leading congregations and building a reputation as one of the most powerful preachers in New York. His church, Grace Tabernacle Christian Center in Brooklyn, was already famous for its incredible music program. But Come Thou Almighty King was what introduced Wright to the wider gospel music world. The original hymn is old. We're talking about words written in the 1700s. But Wright took those ancient lyrics and wrapped them in this incredible contemporary gospel arrangement that made them feel urgent and alive. His voice was absolutely massive, with this rich, powerful moan that could fill up any space. When he sang Come Thou Almighty King, it didn't sound like a polite request. It sounded like a royal summons. What made Wright's version special was how he balanced respect for the traditional hymn with his own unique style. He didn't just sing the words, he preached them. Every line felt like it was coming straight from his heart, like he was personally inviting God to come and take control of everything. The song became this perfect mix of old-school reverence and contemporary power. The track became huge in churches across America. It was the kind of song that could turn a regular Sunday service into a spiritual event. Wright's arrangement was complex enough to challenge good church choirs, but accessible enough that congregations could sing along. The song had these incredible builds where Wright would start quiet and gradually increase the intensity until everyone in the room was on their feet. Wright's success with this song was interesting because he was already established in ministry. He wasn't trying to become a gospel star. He was a pastor who happened to have an incredible voice and a gift for musical arrangement. Come Thou Almighty King became his calling card, but it was always clear that Wright saw himself as a minister first and a recording artist second. 7. I Love Me Better Than That by Shirley Murdock.
I love me better than that, yeah.
Shirley Murdock's I Love Me Better Than That was one of the most surprising gospel comebacks of the late 1990s. This was a woman who had been known for sultry R&B hits in the 1980s, and suddenly she was on gospel radio with a song about self-respect and spiritual growth. Murdock had been through some serious changes in her personal life. She had found religion, gotten married, and decided to leave her secular music career behind. I Love Me Better Than That was her way of announcing to the world that she was a different person now. The song was basically her musical autobiography, a story about learning to value yourself and refusing to accept less than you deserve. The track came out in 1998, right when gospel music was going through another evolution. Artists like Kirk Franklin were pushing boundaries, and there was room for different types of gospel songs. Murdock's track wasn't a traditional praise song or a worship ballad. It was more like a self-help anthem wrapped in gospel music, with lyrics that talked about personal growth and spiritual transformation. What made the song powerful was Murdoch's delivery. She had this soulful, conversational style that made you feel like she was talking directly to you. The lyrics were straightforward. She sang about refusing to settle for bad relationships, about learning to love herself, about making better choices. It was the kind of message that resonated with women who were trying to rebuild their lives after difficult experiences. The song became huge in black churches, especially among women's groups and ministries focused on personal development. It was the kind of track that played at women's conferences and empowerment events. Murdoch had tapped into something that a lot of gospel music wasn't addressing: the idea that faith could help you develop healthy boundaries and self-respect. The track got serious radio play and helped establish Murdoch as a legitimate gospel artist. But like so many others on this list, she never managed to recreate the magic of that one song. She released other gospel music, continued performing at churches and conferences, and remained active in ministry. But I Love Me Better Than That became her gospel calling card. 8. There's a Leak in This Old Building by LaShun Pace. LaShun Pace's "There's a Leak in This Old Building" is probably the most creative metaphor in gospel music history. This song came out in the mid-1990s and had people laughing, crying, and catching the Holy Spirit all at the same time. Pace took the idea of a leaky church building and turned it into this incredible allegory about problems in the church and in people's lives. Pace was already known in gospel circles as one of the most powerful voices in the business. She was part of the Pace Sisters, a group that had been tearing up churches for years with their incredible harmonies and energetic performances. But There's a Leak in This Old Building was her breakout solo moment, the song that proved she could carry a track all by herself. The song was brilliant in its simplicity. Pace sang about a church building with a leak, but everyone knew she was really talking about bigger problems. The leak became a metaphor for gossip, backbiting, financial problems, and all the other issues that can damage a church community. But instead of being preachy or judgmental, Pace made it funny and relatable. What made the song so effective was Pace's storytelling ability. She had this gift for painting pictures with her voice, making listeners feel like they were right there in that leaky church building. Her voice could go from conversational to powerful in seconds, and she used that range to keep people engaged throughout the entire song. The track became huge because it addressed something that every church person could relate to. Every congregation has dealt with building problems, financial struggles, or interpersonal conflicts. Pace's song acknowledged those realities while maintaining a sense of humor about them. It was like she was saying, "Yeah, we've got problems, but we're going to figure it out together." The song's popularity also showed how much people appreciated honesty in gospel music. Instead of pretending that church life was perfect, Pace admitted that there were leaks in the building. But she also offered hope. The song ended with the promise that the problems could be fixed if people worked together and kept their faith strong. Pace's performance style was incredible. She could make you laugh with her facial expressions and hand gestures, then make you cry with the raw emotion in her voice. There's a Leak in This Old Building showcased all of her talents, her humor, her vocal power, and her ability to connect with audiences on a personal level. Despite the success of this song, Pace never had another solo hit that reached the same level of recognition. She continued performing with her sisters, recorded other music, and remained a beloved figure in gospel music. But There's a Leak in This Old Building became her signature song, the track that everyone associated with her name. 9. My Soul Has Been Anchored in the Lord by Douglas Miller.
Hard to tell the night from day.
Douglas Miller's My Soul Has Been Anchored in the Lord was the kind of song that could stop a church service in its tracks. This track came out in the early 2000s and featured one of the most incredible vocal performances in gospel music history. Miller took a traditional spiritual and turned it into something absolutely transcendent. Miller wasn't a household name when this song came out. He was a classically trained singer who had been working in gospel music for years, but mostly behind the scenes. He had sung background vocals for other artists, worked as a vocal coach, and performed in smaller venues. But "My Soul Has Been Anchored in the Lord" was his moment to shine. The song itself is based on an old spiritual that's been around for generations. But Miller's arrangement was something special. He started the song quietly, almost conversationally, then gradually built it into this soaring declaration of faith. His voice had this incredible range and power that could make you believe every word he was singing. What made Miller's version so powerful was his technical skill combined with genuine emotion. This wasn't just showing off. Every vocal run, every sustained note, every dynamic change served the song's message. Miller understood that the point wasn't to impress people with his voice, but to communicate something deeper about faith and perseverance. The song became a favorite among gospel singers and vocal coaches. Miller's performance was so technically perfect that it became a standard for measuring other singers' abilities. But it wasn't just about technique. The song had this emotional depth that connected with audiences on a spiritual level. Miller's background in classical music gave him a unique approach to gospel singing. He brought a level of sophistication and precision to the genre that was sometimes missing from other contemporary gospel artists. "My Soul Has Been Anchored in the Lord" showcased his ability to blend classical technique with gospel emotion. The song's message was timeless. It was about having faith that sustains you through difficult times. Is about being grounded in something deeper than circumstances. Miller's delivery made those words feel fresh and relevant, even though they'd been sung for generations. 10. I Believe by Ann Nesby.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I believe. Do it. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I believe.
Ann Nesby's I Believe was the solo gospel moment that everyone saw coming, but somehow still felt surprising. Nesby had been the powerhouse voice behind Sounds of Blackness for years, but this 2002 track was her chance to step into the spotlight and deliver a message that was completely her own. Nesby's voice was already legendary in gospel circles. She had been the lead singer on Optimistic and other Sounds of Blackness hits, proving that she could handle any style of music. But I Believe showed a different side of her artistry. This was more personal, more intimate than her work with the group. The song came out during a time when gospel music was becoming more diverse in its sounds and messages. Artists were exploring different ways to express faith, and Nesby's track fit perfectly into that landscape. I Believe wasn't just about religious faith. It was about believing in yourself, in your dreams, in your ability to overcome obstacles. What made the song special was Nesby's vocal approach. She didn't oversing or try to show off her incredible range. Instead, she delivered the lyrics with this quiet confidence that made every word feel important. The song built gradually, giving listeners time to absorb the message before reaching its powerful climax. The production was perfect for Nesby's voice. Instead of overwhelming her with heavy instrumentation, the arrangement gave her space to breathe and communicate. The song felt like a conversation between Nesby and the listener, with music that supported rather than competed with her vocals. I Believe resonated with audiences because it addressed something that everyone could relate to: the need for faith in yourself and your abilities. Nesby sang about pushing through doubt, about maintaining hope when things look impossible, about the power of positive thinking. It was a message that worked whether you were religious or not. Nesby's performance on this track showed why she had been such an important part of Sounds of Blackness's success. Her voice had this incredible combination of power and sensitivity that could adapt to any musical style. I Believe proved that she could carry a song completely on her own, creating something beautiful and meaningful without needing a large group to support her. Which of these one-hit wonders took you down memory lane the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip through gospel history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more soulful content.